All right, good evening. This is the Bicycle Pedestrian Commission meeting. Today is March 19, 2025. I call the meeting order at 7:03 p.m. Our staff liaison, David Stillman, will proceed with the roll call. David, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Ganga,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eshelbeck,
Here.
Commissioner Madipala,
Yes.
Commissioner Marcy, Commissioner Wolf.
Yes.
Okay, we have a quorum, Commissioner Marcy absent.
Thank you, David. The next item is the approval of minutes. That's the first item. This is the February 20, 2025, the bicycle pedestrian minutes. And any comments or on the minutes, or do I have?
I move to approve the meeting minutes from February 20. I second it.
David, we have the motion. Any comments on the motion?
I looked at it, that's good.
For the Zoom, share your screen. Share it.
Okay, so we have Commissioner Eshelberg proposed the motion, and we have, Vice Chair Madipala, Commissioner Madipala seconded the motion. David, can you please help us?
Yes, so for the motion on the screen, how do you vote? Chair Ganga,
Yes.
Vice Chair Eshelbeck,
Yes.
Commissioner Madipala,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0.
I see absent. Right, stop sharing.
Thank you, David. So, David, do we have any postponements?
No, we do.
So the next item is the oral communications. This is oral communications specifically for the items that are not on the agenda. Once that if you have any comments that are on the agenda, you can speak to that agenda item. This one is for items that are not on the agenda. And so each of the public speakers get 3 minutes to speak. And do we have any speakers that want to speak up on the public comments? Yeah.
To stand up.
And this is Debbie.
Hi,
Please go ahead.
She gets me on the timer.
She can just start. Go ahead.
Good.
thank you. Good evening, Bike and Tech Commission. I'm Debbie Chesson. I'm a 39-year resident. I'm the block leader for North Portal, Drake, and Auburn. I live on North Portal. We're very close to the sound wall. The Wool Road Housing Project is proposing to open the sound wall either at the end of Auburn Drive or the eastern end of Merritt Drive. Their reason is for bike pedestrian access, but there is the Tamian and new trailhead right on the property and a class 4 bike lane along Stevens Creek. Opening the wall is not about the access, it's about access to our neighborhood parking. Because the projects are not providing adequate parking, some of the units don't have any parking at all. For the residents, workers, and visitors, we're here to make you aware of the enormous opposition to opening the sound wall at any location along the wall. Last night, our neighborhood presented our reasons. Unfortunately, the presenters could not make it here tonight, so I'm gonna ask that you that I will present it, asking you to please review last night's city council meeting oral communications. and listen to our 10-minute presentation. We submitted a petition with 525 original signatures from over 297 homes. We collected them over 2 weekends, with the majority coming from my neighborhood. Please explore alternative solutions that support connectivity without compromising our neighborhood safety and character. Most of the units have maybe one parking space, and if we open that wall, they're all gonna park in our neighborhood to walk over all visitors. So opening it, we have a covenant apparently that was with our neighborhood when they built the mall. So opening the wall is for sound and many other reasons, but please listen to the presentation from last night. We did it over oral communications. Thank you. And I have a copy for just position here from some of the things that we turned in last night.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Any other speakers for the oral communication? I don't see any. So we close the oral communications. Next item is the written communications. David, do we have any written communications today?
No, Chair, we don't.
Thank you. We did not receive any written communications. So let's move to the business today. This is the item number 2. Cupertino transportation plan. So David, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. For this project, I would like to introduce our senior transportation planner, Matt Schrader, who is project manager for the project for the city. He'll give a brief introduction, then we'll turn it over to Christopher Kidd from Alpha Planning Consultant working on this project.
Thanks, David, and nice to meet all of you. So we thought before we kicked off the project, it would be good to get or just introduce the project to you all so you could hear what is going to be forthcoming in terms of the outreach and project expectations. So we have here from Alta Design, Christopher Kidd, who will be providing a high level overview of what you can expect from the project over the coming months.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. And let me get this presentation on screen. Is that going to do it? That's going to do it. Great. There we go. Interesting. Background isn't showing up. We'll see if it tracks. Okay. Yeah, so thanks again for having me tonight. My name is Christopher Kidd. I work for a company called Alta Planning and Design. It specializes in bicycle, pedestrian, safety, safe routes to school work. This is my return to Cupertino. For those who might remember, I worked with David on the development of the 2016 bike plan back when I was at Alta my first time around. But tonight I wanted to kind of go through our agenda for this presentation, really introduce the project and what our schedule is, to talk about what our goals are for the plan, to provide a little background and context for the work that we're going to be doing, share with you our plan for how we're going to look at doing analysis for this plan, and how that and public input will all feed into the recommendations that we develop. To share kind of what plan adoption and next steps look like, as well as getting the input from this commission. So just as an introduction, we are doing what's called an active transportation plan for the city of Cupertino. And that really is a merging and combining of the bicycle plan and the pedestrian plan of the city. And really it's to create a guiding vision for walking, rolling, and biking. I think it's really important for us to stress that it's not just walking and biking, it's also what we call rolling, which means that there's all these broad variety of devices that are out there that now can legally use the bike network. We think about things like scooters, but also skateboards, also things like segways or even wheel devices, and most notably, mobility scooters and power chairs are legal users of the bike network. And so when we think about who the bike network is for, and who does it serve and how do we design it to be inclusive, we need to think about all of those different users. And really what we want to make sure that we're doing, and our goal for this plan is to help identify gaps in the network and opportunities and ways to combine the project lists of the previous plans and prioritize those in a way that's really reflecting the needs and the values of the city. Our project schedule is here. We kicked off with the city in February. We're now here to talk with you all, and we'll be starting a public engagement process next month for our first phase while we're collecting information, starting to do our analysis. And then those things will feed into the development of recommendations, which we'll be bringing back to the public in phase 2 at the end of this summer, which will help lead us into the development of a draft and final plan, ending with adoption of the city council in February of next year. When we talk about what are our planned goals, we really want to focus on kind of 6 key areas. We want to focus on improving access, maintenance, ensuring that we can build and maintain good facilities. That we have a focus on safety in particular, especially with the city of Cupertino's Vision Zero plan adoption just last year. We want to focus on sustainability and advancing the goals of the climate action plan that the city of Cupertino has adopted, and also how to bring both balance and fairness to the projects and to mobility and to the way that projects are distributed around the city. And we're going to be able to accomplish those things really by making sure that we reflect the values of the community of the city of Cupertino, really ensuring that people feel connected to these projects and that help them in their daily lives. That we do engagement across the community of Cupertino. There's a lot of different folks with different opinions and different stakeholder groups. We want to make sure that we're reaching all of them. We'll want to really focus our recommendations on connectivity and cost effectiveness, making sure that we can line up successful projects for the city to get done. Doesn't do anybody any good to have a plan that just sits on a shelf for 10 years. And that really leads into the last point, is creating a really clear roadmap for the city, for what work the city pursues, but then also providing a level of certainty to the public so that they understand how and when and why we're doing projects, and that they can feel confident in, even if they don't necessarily like a certain particular project, they know when it's happening, they know why it's happening, and that it provides that level of certainty as we move into the future. As background, this is probably not new to any of you, but there's a lot of previous plans that are completed by the city of Cupertino that inform the work that we're doing. Starting with the bicycle plan back in 2016, we have our pedestrian plan, the climate action plan, the local roadway safety plan, which led into the Vision Zero. And you most recently updated your mobility element. So these are all things that we are looking at and trying to synthesize to provide the foundation of the work that we're doing. In a lot of ways, we view this not as a brand new plan, but really a synthesis of all of these other plans, to bring them all into a single place, to have a unified vision for how we pursue projects into the future. And part of that, looking towards the future, is also looking towards the past and looking at what the city has been able to accomplish coming out of these plans. And so we know that since the 2018 pedestrian plan, the city has completed 12 projects and has started 10 more. And for the bike plan adopted in 2016, they've completed 20 projects and are in the midst of design on 14 others. So with that context, wanted to share some of the things that we're starting to work on, and this is probably not as useful for you, but I think when we talk to the public, we want to be able to share these things about. When we talk about a bicycle and pedestrian plan, an active transportation plan, what does it mean? And it first starts with sidewalks. And so we need to understand where sidewalks are, where they're not. We're working on appropriately mapping out where all of the traffic signals, the intersection controls, the crosswalks are. Those are the key elements of being a pedestrian. We also have our existing bikeways. And so we have all of the progress, the projects that we just talked about that the city's been able to complete are kind of shown here in terms of the different classifications of the bike network, talking about things like our separated bikeways, our buffered bike lanes, and where those have been implemented by the city over the past few years. But another really important piece of an active transportation plan is transit. And every single transit user is also a pedestrian. And we need to be looking at and thinking about how we integrate the projects that we look at with transit to ensure that the transit can be safe, that it can be convenient, that it can be efficient, and that when we look at our bikeway projects, how those integrate with transit operations. because we want to ensure that transit can be as competitive as possible against driving times. And we need to find ways to integrate bikeway project with transit so that they can both be successful. And that's just a little transition. I think this is one of my favorite photos I've come across so far, is this really great photo of the Ragnar Creek Trail with a young family just kind of out for a stroll. And so we also wanted to share with you for our work program what we're going to be focusing on. And one of those things is analysis. And first and foremost, we'll be taking the safety analysis from the 2024 Vision Zero plan. It was very strong analysis. We want to make sure that that serves as a foundation of the work that we're doing and really drives the way that we look at recommendations. And building on top of that, we'll be doing a series of 3 other kinds of analysis. We'll be doing level of traffic stress for bicycles and pedestrians. We'll be doing an analysis called active trip potential, and we'll be able to combine the 2 of those to do analysis that we call stress adjusted short trips. And I'll talk about what each of those mean. But the overwhelming point of all of this is to say that we'll be doing all of these forms of analysis to then help and combine with the public input that we get in this upcoming phase of outreach. So when we look at the outcomes of the Vision Zero plan and looking at the analysis that was done for that plan specifically, it identified a series of high entry network corridors with the top 6 corridors listed here and pointed out on the map. But it also looked at intersections, and it identified the top 48 intersections across the city where they had like the highest collision profiles and the highest record of serious and fatal injury collisions, with those top 6 intersection locations again listed here and shown. But supplementing that, we'll be doing some other analysis. And so to kind of share what this analysis is and how it works, we'll be doing what we call level of traffic stress analysis for both bicycles and pedestrians. These 2 graphics here kind of show a scale from LTS4, which is the kind of the most highest stress roadway possible that you could encounter as either for somebody walking or biking, up through LTS1, which is a facility that would be comfortable for anyone to walk or bike on. And of course, there's different conditions and different needs that exist between a bicycle and a pedestrian. And so we have 2 different ways of running this analysis. And just as an example of what this analysis looks like, this is an LTS map done for the city of Santa Rosa, where we've been able to color code all of the streets across the city according to the level of traffic stress. This one is for pedestrians specifically. To complement that analysis, we'll also be doing analysis called active trip potential. This is using real data from people's cell phones about their origins and destinations. There's a company called Replica, which sells this data in very large batches where the data is anonymized. So you're not able to pull anything out of it that would be personal. But it does allow you to look at where trips are starting and where they're ending across the city of Cupertino. And what we can do with that analysis is start to zero in on where our short trips happen. Because short trips, especially those that are under 2 miles, are the trips that are there's the most potential for those trips to be taken easily by walking or biking. And so by understanding where short trips are happening, we can start to understand where there's the potential for more walking and biking projects that can be successful. And so an example of that is from Mount Shasta, a plan that we recently did that shows kind of the density of walk and bike trips in different parts of the city by zone. But then what we really want to do, and the most critical piece about understanding where and how we should be focusing our recommendations, is what we call stress adjusted short trips. And that's really understanding that if you are on a very high stress street, especially if you're biking on a high stress street, that street can feel a lot longer than it actually is. And it can be the thing that deters someone from taking a walking or biking trip. And so by being able to assign kind of these distance values to different segments of the street, we can combine that with where we know short trips are happening to really understand where there are gaps that exist, where people could be taking short trips, but they aren't because the streets feel so stressful. People feel unsafe. They feel like that they don't feel that it's an appropriate place for them to be walking or biking. And so an example of this is some analysis we did for the city of Sacramento, where on the left here is a kind of a walk access map of showing what parks are within a 5 minute, 10-minute walk for people. But then we wanted to adjust it by the stress that they experience. And so this map on the right then shows a very different picture of where people for adjusting for stress would be within a 5 minute, 10 minute, and 15 minute walk. And by doing so, that can allow us to really zero in on where are these pinch points, these gaps in the network that would have the most benefit and generate the most positive change by being able to close those gaps. But analysis is only one side of the coin for when we develop recommendations. The other side is our outreach work and our public outreach work. We're starting an outreach phase next month, going through May. We'll have a website and an interactive web map up online, hopefully next week, that people can use to provide input directly to us. We'll also be hosting 3 different pop-up events in the community and hosting 2 different workshops, one in person and one virtual. And for this phase, we're really focusing on information gathering, trying to understand where are the places people want us to focus on, what are the priorities people have, where do they experience barriers to walking and biking, and where do they need us to be taking a closer look at specific streets and intersections. We'll be at Earth and Arbor Day on April 5th. We're currently working out our permit for the Cherry Blossom Festival right now, so we hope to be able to lock that down very soon. And we'll also be participating in Bike to Wherever Day on May 15th. We also will be hosting our workshops, both virtual and actually in this building in May at the beginning of the month. We also will have another phase of outreach in August and September, where we'll have an updated website, an updated web map for people to provide input, as well as another series of pop-up events and community workshops. And for that phase, we'll be really focusing on bringing our project recommendations to the public to understand what we got right, what we didn't get right, and how we prioritize those projects to ensure that the things that are the most important to the community are the things that the city is working on. In terms of the development of recommendations and how this fits with all of the work that we're doing, we're first starting with all of the projects in the previous bicycle and pedestrian plans and kind of combining them, filtering out everything that has already been built, taking note of the projects that are already underway, and that really is our starting point. We then take all of the outreach that we received during phase 1, as well as the analysis that we'll be conducting to help inform where we need to focus, where we need to change old recommendations, where we need to create new recommendations. That will be then brought back to the public, where we'll be able to use additional analysis and outreach to inform the prioritization that we do to help determine which projects go first in that project list for the city. After we're through those 2 phases of outreach, we hope to release a draft plan in December of 2025, and then bring the final plan to the city council in the early next year. When we release that draft plan, we'll be posting it as a commentable interactive PDF document on our project website, where anybody who is viewing that PDF will be able to leave comments on any page and any position in that plan document. And that'll be something that'll be viewable by other members of the public. And so we want to make sure that we have a good amount of transparency, that people feel like their input is seen and is being used. And we think that that's one of the ways that we want to try to accomplish that. We also want to make sure that people know that this plan is coming, that it's happening. So I think this is one of the places where we want to make sure that we're getting the word out with the public. We will have a website. We're saying at least by the Monday after next, but hopefully we'll have the website live next week. And we want to make sure that people know about the pop-up events that we'll be at. We want to make sure people know about an opportunity to participate in our community workshops. And for this meeting, I think we wanted to be able to answer your questions as a commission. We wanted to get input on how we should be organizing and pursuing the major broad goals of the plan. As well as if you have any input on the criteria that we develop for developing project recommendations. I did want to note that prioritization is also incredibly important. That's an item that we'll be bringing back to this BPAC, or this Vice Pedestrian Commission in July. We'll be bringing the project recommendations, And we'll be having a full kind of an open discussion about how we approach prioritization for those projects. And that'll all be able to take place with you before the next phase of public outreach starts in August. And so we have QR codes that are available, and we'll have flyers, we'll have other materials that'll be produced over the next week or so. And we want to make sure that that's available to you and that you're able to share it with your kind of constituents and communities. This email address will be active hopefully by the end of this week. And so I also have my business cards here. And I just wanted to thank you for your time tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. You'll also see right here for those in person that on the table we have a kind of a draft of the outreach posters that we'll be bringing, kind of one of a few. We have a set of about 5 to 7 posters that we'll be bringing to all of our events, where folks will be able to sticky notes, different stickers of different colors to denote things like barriers or destinations. And we really want to use that to gain a really broad and full amount of input. With that, happy to take any questions, and I'll be taking this on my phone as well.
I was wondering, if I look at the project schedule here, the public engagement pretty much ends in September according to the schedule here. But the draft only becomes available in October. Wouldn't it be appropriate to have some kind of public engagement at the time of the draft available as well? I think otherwise it's gonna be a surprise to a lot of people.
So I just wanted to clarify, right? So right now, we will be going over the commission so that commission members can ask for any clarifying questions. So we're not doing a discussion this time, but then we'll come back for the second round after the public comments for discussion. Yeah, please. Thank you.
I can answer that question.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, so the current plan I have with the city is so when we have the draft plan published and available, is to publish it through the website and to have it available as a commentable interactive PDF, and to also do communications through the city, social media, other communications through mailing lists to ensure that people know that the draft plan is available for viewing. I think that especially when it gets to the draft plan stage, it's less useful to have things like pop-up events because the draft plan itself is so voluminous that there's not a lot you can necessarily cover within the draft plan. And so I think that was kind of our thinking for that, but
Maybe a way to explicitly mention it in the document, in the schedule as well. And then when you publish the draft in December, I don't know, begin December, end of December, doesn't really matter that much, but holidays are also in that time frame. If you really want to publish this in February, you may be very tight on schedule here.
yeah, I think it's an ambitious schedule that we have with the city, and I think, we'll see how we do with all of the other phases and see if that schedule has to change at all.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have tons of questions.
Okay, so if you have clarity questions, please go.
Yeah. So Chris, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you for very informative presentation. So looks like, you have been involved with some of this since 2016, so that's great. You said all types of mobility devices are allowed on bike lane, right? So do they require, certain width if that's the case? If it's a class 4 bike lane where, we have concrete barriers, the devices have a need to overtake each other and all that stuff. So is there a specification that says, it has to be this wide to support all these types of mobility devices on the separated bike lane?
Yeah, so just to clarify on that, there are also a lot of mobility devices that are not legal to use in the bike lane.
Yeah.
Even things like class 3 electric bikes, which have a top speed of over 20 miles an hour, those are not legal to use in bike lanes. Things like, electric scooters that have a certain top speed or engine size, those are classified as mopeds.
Mhm.
And so I think the general rule of thumb that you can think about is devices that, if powered, have a top speed no greater than 20 miles an hour. Those are generally legal. There's also a lot of regulation that hasn't yet taken place at the state level, which is needed. There's very clear regulation for e-bikes. There is not clear regulation for scooters. And so that's kind of an evolving need at the state level. But in terms of facility design, facility design is largely regulated by the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, as well as the Highway Design Manual. And those have minimum widths that are established for things like separated bikeways. But I think the emerging state of practice around all these new devices is that there does need to be wider facilities. So there aren't, at this point, legal requirements for those wider facilities, but I think the best practices that we're seeing that are coming up are moving in the direction of having wider facilities in order to accommodate things like safe passing or wide-based vehicles that, because bikes are on two wheels straight, but a, mobility scooter has wheels on the side, on its base. And so when you have a cross slope that is very steep, that can be like a tipping hazard for a device like that. And so these are there's an emerging state of practice around how do you start to design more inclusively for this broader range of devices.
Yeah. So the reason I'm asking is, I live on McClellan Road.
Yeah.
And I voted when I was on the bike commission previously. I voted for the separated bike lane. Now, after experiencing it for such a long time, I regret my vote. Okay, I think it was a bad idea to start with, and I see a lot of cities that are undoing the class 4 bike lanes. I've read that up, right? So is there a better alternative, right? I'm all for the mobility and walk bike capability of Stevens Creek. I really want to see Stevens Creek like a thriving retail go to destination type of thing for all types of people. But I want to solve the problem, not create problems. And I believe McClellan bike lane created problems. And in fact, I witnessed last Saturday a road rage incident right in front of my house. I have a video recording of it, which I'm going to share with the commission and as well as the council, where the biker wasn't using the bike lane because the debris and need to overtake the other biker, and car was honking and they got into a fight, and luckily it didn't escalate, and we got back and and as soon as the biker got on and stayed on the car lane, the car overtook that person at a good speed. That I'm witnessing this on an ongoing basis all the time, right? Because it's a narrow bike lane, there's a lot of debris. Almost 6 months of the year, the amount of debris that accumulates in that lane is so much. Bikers are avoiding bike lane, right? In fact, a friend of mine, who bikes regularly from Palo Alto to Saratoga, avoids McClellan precisely for that reason. So I want us to solve problems, not create problems, right? So that's kind of where I'm coming. So having said that, so you said something about old recommendations versus new recommendations. You want to kind of look at that, right? Because old recommendations was built based on certain assumptions. Having learned from these things that we have already done, what are we going to do something different? So for example, class 3 bike lane, like I bike on inverters, right? That right. So and I bike on foothill all the time, right? Because the bike lanes are wide, but there are no barriers. People that need to overtake, they overtake because there are no barriers, and when they see the cars, there are no cars, they go around and all, right? But when the moment we create the barrier, it creates all kind of problems where the bikers and the other devices you are talking about that have a need to overtake the biker, slow biker, will gravitate towards using the car lane. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I think we need to solve these problems, the mobility issues, without creating problems. Right?
Yeah, I certainly think there is a balance to be struck.
Yeah.
I mean, in kind of as design kind of advances and emerging best practices, there really is no substitute for separated bike lanes. And I think especially with streets that have certain roadway and speed characteristics and volume characteristics, there really isn't a way to create a facility that can be, you know, I guess truly inclusive and enticing to a broader range of potential users without that separation. That being said, there's a lot of advances in how they are designed in order to help mitigate some of the issues that you brought up.
You mentioned, maintenance and safety, right?
Absolutely.
So maintenance is a nightmare. I can tell you that, the separated bike lane, there is zero maintenance. And David, I know you visit, our block leaders home for quarterly meetings. He can show you the number of, the bollards and, on the visible signs that we put on that separated bike lane that falls off, causes a hazard for the car as well as, the bikers. He has a collection of them. Next time you come and I'll ask him to hand them off to you. So I think, the maintenance and safety and, old recommendations versus new recommendation, those are all, important things to take into consideration.
Yeah,
And also, we should look at, what other cities are doing, because I'm seeing, quite a few cities undoing the separated bike lanes in favor of, different kind. Coming to the
Do you
speed.
have that would just, I'm
I have
curious
the
to know which cities?
I think I have the links, I can.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to get those.
Yeah.
So
And the speed and, and the bikers, I don't think, the cars in Stevens Peak are going faster than, Foothill Expressway, right? Foothill Expressway, cars go at 50 miles an hour, right? And there are bikers. That's because, the bike lanes are wide enough, but there are no separation, like, the barriers. So people are able to, manage it. It's about, educating the community and, controlling the speed and, creating space for everyone to coexist.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I just want to say that let's ask for clarifying questions specifically on the presentation, and we'll come back. And every one of you, I'll make sure that every one of you have enough time to have your point and discussions as well. Yeah. So, thank you.
We have a question regarding the various persona. I think in terms of biking here, we're all able-bodied males, so probably not representative of each and every persona that's going to use the streets of Cupertino. So I'm curious, I'm seeing here the pedestrian level of traffic stress with the thing here, it's very small. But yeah, people of all ages and abilities would feel comfortable walking and rolling. So I think that's interesting because there's a two-dimensional aspect of it. There's a persona on the one side, and then there's a geographic distribution of these type of people. So if you look at schools, for example, you have more children. If you have like a senior like home, you would have a lot of seniors. So how do you account for this persona? Is it something like? I'm just curious how you want to make sure that personas are represented on both dimensions of geographic as well as ability. I'm just curious as to how you look at it.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up actually, because I forgot to mention, that part of what we'll be doing as well is bringing in all of the information that's been collected by the Cupertino Safe Routes to Schools program, which is very robust and has like a lot of really great data. And then we want to make sure that we use that and integrate that and take advantage of the great work that they've been doing over the past 8 years. I think that is one other element that we want to make sure that we're looking at. I appreciate you bringing that up for the development of project recommendations, is looking at things like proximities to schools, because that, there's a higher likelihood of a certain type of user using that road, and that we need to think about what's the appropriateness of certain types of projects and treatments, not just for the bike lanes, but also for things like for intersection crossings. We know that students at younger ages, especially elementary school students, cognitively have a real challenge with tracking direction of travel in both directions for cars at crosswalks. And so that's an instance where if you can create a crossing where they only have to look in one direction at a time with like a median refuge island in the middle of that crosswalk, that can be something that is not only more safe for students, but also makes them more comfortable and confident being able to cross the street in the first place. And so those are the types of things that we want to make sure that we're taking into account when we look at updating these project recommendations.
Any questions?
I'm not sure if this is a clarifying question.
Yeah.
But, so, like, what criteria do you use for designing? So I know like, the National Association of City Transportation Officials just came out with the 25 Urban Bikeway Design Guide. Is that something you would utilize in your?
So that is what we call a supplemental guide. So there's some guides that are legally required, things like the California Highway Design Manual or the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Those are legal requirements for when we design roadways. But those only provide kind of a rudimentary blueprint in a lot of cases for how we design things. And so the NACDO Urban Bikeways Design Guide is a great resource. There's also the AASHTO Bike Design Guide, which is another resource. There's also Caltrans issues things called Design Information Bulletins, DIBs. And some of those pertain to how you design bikeways. So I think it was 2 years ago, it's coming up on 2 years, I think. There was DIB 92, which is their kind of complete streets and contextual guidance document, which looks at things like when you're designing something like a bike boulevard, from a Caltrans perspective, what are the design considerations for how you design? So those are all resources that we pull and think about.
But the Urban Bikeway Design Guide, you're saying is not a legal document. It may be more strict. I mean, like they recommend, for instance, like separated bike lanes when the speeds are above 25 miles per hour, which I just read recently. So it's okay.
Yeah, so that is, again, it's what we call a supplemental design guide. But I think when you look at DIB 92, for instance, that's also, it's not legally binding. It's design guidance from Caltrans. So it has more weight within California. But that also has kind of similar, like there's like, you often see this like chart of like, as volumes go up and speeds go up, then they put different types of facilities across the chart. And the DIB 92 has a similar to that.
Thank you. One other question. So for like the bike commuters that are, and Apple's the main employer here, so is there any way of, and there's this connectivity between cities. So I don't bike to work anymore, but I used to bike from Cupertino to Menlo Park. So I'm concerned about everything along the way.
It's quite a route.
And it makes a difference, but so if we're trying to encourage people to get out of their cars and to bike as a separate mode of transportation, then are we gonna be surveying the Apple employees about what they would like? Is that something that can be done?
Well, one thing that we are doing is that we are also integrating the countywide transportation plan. So VTA has a countywide bike plan. They also conducted a study called the Bicycle Superhighway Study for Santa Clara County, trying to understand how do we link all of these cities in this regional way with really high quality continuous facilities. And so I think that's kind of the major pieces that we look to when trying to understand regionally, how do we connect with other cities and create these kind of seamless projects that you're talking about.
All right, thank you all for your questions and thank you for clarifying as well. So now let me go and see whether do we have any public comments or speakers?
No speakers.
All right, thank you for that. Then we'll bring it back to the commission. And thank you. I mean, this is like a really wide topic. And it's a super important one for the commission. We do this once in a decade. And it's about like 8 to 10 years or 7 to 9 years since we did the last two plans. And so we want to make sure that, we do this right. And the commission wants to be definitely involved in making sure we get this right along with the city staff as well. So based on the questions, I just kind of laid down the structure. So at least we can create a structure for this discussion based like so broad topics. So what I heard is like, how do we get, I'll just give you a few things and then we can always give free form of discussion as well. One thing I heard is like, feedback from the past projects to see what worked and what did not work. Okay. How can we bring this into the table? That's one thing. The second thing I heard about is the public outreach. how do we make sure that we get the community input effectively, right? I saw a lot of, you have a lot of tools that in the package, but that's the second important thing that maybe, we would like to get commission's input as well. The third thing is actually, I also heard like a type of users, like, heard, oh, okay, how is the commuters, like a Apple, or in general, I would say like, school, we heard about the school as well. School safety, commuters who are going for shopping. I didn't hear about anything, how you are categorizing this one. So shopping, recreation, all right? So figure out the type of users and, how do you bring the data and overlay on top of this one? So that's something that I heard. And the last one is, what is the structure of the document? Like, what are you going to recommend based on this? Because we're going to look at the past two plans, but going forward, what do we want to see in the document? Maybe we want to give the input, the commission wants to give the input on the structure of that document as well, right? What's the outcome? How do you lay the roadmaps? Then, and then you also talked about the timeline. I want to talk about the timeline as to when do you go to the commission, when you come back to the, the commission for inputs to the public. So we wanted to discuss, that one as well. So that's how I lay the structure. So let's go ahead and then, I'll open up for discussion. I'll be the last to do. But, why don't we go from the left to right? That way all of us get an opportunity to talk. Yes, please go ahead. You can start.
I'll skip.
Yeah. Okay, please go ahead. If you wanted to start, please go ahead, Herbert.
No, I think there are two ways to look at what you presented to us today. One is kind of the project in and of itself, which is like, okay, what do we want Cupertino to look like in the future? And the kind of the meta aspect of it, which is like, okay, how do we get to the process to get to the form of the actual plan in the future? I think what's going to be very important is to have as robust an engagement process as possible. One thing that I think would be interesting would be also, I haven't seen that in the presentation, to get the input from the business community. Like, what do businesses would want if they were to see more foot traffic or bikes? And then that also includes businesses like companies with commuters, I think, which would be interesting also to get their input, to ask Apple, okay, do your employees, because it's a pretty massive campus, like how do your employees want to go to work? And what do they ask for them? Because they might not be Cupertino residents, but they are definitely stakeholders because they come from somewhere else and maybe they come back. So I think that's maybe something that you might want to look into. I think as of the plan in and of itself, I really like the picture of the Regnac Quick Trail. I live right next to it, and I think what's key to the success of the Regnac Quick Trail as opposed to other trails that I experienced is that it actually connects meaningful points in Cupertino. It connects parks, it connects schools, it connects the library. And so when you have like a bike lane from A to B and A is nowhere and B is nowhere, well, guess what? Nobody comes. But if you have a connection, an actual network where people want to go from A to B to C to Z, that's when the utilization is just incredible, just like in the case of the Regnac Trail. So so that you have the desired destinations, I think that's going to be very important to take a very, very close look at it, to see where do people want to go in the first place before even looking at, okay, biking and walking, like where do people want to go, and then make that based on that one.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Commissioner.
I already said a lot of things. So regarding your question, like, which city took, I think at least I know 3-4 cities. San Mateo is one of them. They're removing the bike lanes that they previously put in. So, and regarding this, mixing up, different modes of, transport, right? I would highly recommend, we study what happens on the trails, right? As a biker, I generally avoid, biking on trails, right? I bike on, streets with, class 3 bike lanes and stuff like that, right? So I do not bike on. The reason for that is on trails, you have, mix of people,
Yeah.
like, the walkers, pets, and the bikers.
Mhm.
I've seen way more collisions on those than, I see on the roads. Like just last week, a friend of mine who bikes regularly, this is his picture. On a trail.
Yeah.
On the Stevens Creek Trail. Because he was biking and the walker swung to the wrong side, right? So it's pretty dangerous when we mix, people. So I would highly recommend, study what happens on the trails because there we have mix of people, the bikers and walkers, and different modes of transportation trying to use the same, right? So that's what we will be doing, right? We'll be creating bike lanes that is, you said, different devices are going to use. We need to think about now what it means. So.
Thank you. Yes, please, Commissioner.
Yeah, so
Chair.
I was wondering, so the bike ped plan or active transportation plan, how do you foresee kind of the bicycle and pedestrian kind of overlap or integration? Because today it's mostly separate facilities. There's a few areas that are overlapping, but do you foresee like separate recommendation for bicycle infrastructure, separate recommendation for pedestrians, or are you gonna mix it all together? What's the vision for that?
Yeah.
Not clear on understanding this active transportation plan.
Yeah, so, I think that generally when we look at the projects individually, those would be separated because there are different projects for, pedestrian projects. Like there will be locations where, for example, we need to look at, enhancing an unsignalized, uncontrolled crosswalk. And does that need a thing, there's a device called a rapid rectangular flashing beacon. Like, do we need to do that? Do we need to put a pedestrian island, in the middle of this crossing to improve its safety and comfort? That crosswalk could not be anywhere near the bike network. And so there's no overlap between bike network recommendations and that particular crosswalk. But what we do want to do with this plan is to be able to create a way, really through the prioritization criteria that we develop, we want to develop jointly with you, is how do we create a unified list for the city to pursue? And I think one of the challenges that we've seen from the city in the past is that you have one project list from the bike plan, you have another project list from the pedestrian plan. Which is more important? Which project should be coming first? And so this plan effort will kind of help to answer that question. There's some projects that are combined projects. If we're improving a traffic signal at an intersection on a bikeway, that can be an improvement for pedestrians as well as for people using that bikeway. But there's going to be plenty of times where these are separate projects in separate locations for different purposes. But we still want to be able to combine them in a single prioritized list so that the city can move their projects forward confidently rather than wondering, is this the right one or is that the right one?
I was also wondering, of course, there will be a list of projects that are recommended as part of the prioritization effort. Is there also a content around augmenting those lists of projects that are not necessarily in the millions of dollars of cost, but low-hanging fruit that will make big impact, like policy recommendations about, and this is one of my pet peeves. I think a lot of bicyclists don't understand lights in evening hours, and pedestrians too. That's both of them are true. People just think they will be seen, but without lights, you will not be seen. What can we do as a commission? What can the city do to promote this more aggressively? This is in the low cost, high impact bucket, and I think I'm just not sure existing plans have covered those sufficiently. So I'm just wondering how we think about this.
Yeah. So with a plan like this, you can develop things called programmatic recommendations, which are not the things you build on the street, but the kind of the programs that you run to help improve things like education, enforcement, things of that nature. And so, speaking to your particular question, I've seen, in other cities, other places, there'll be, sometimes it's funded through a local bicycle coalition, sometimes funded through a city. They'll do events called a Light Up the Night event, where they have a bunch of people out at different stations, usually right around the fall when we fall back, because it gets dark really fast all of a sudden. And they'll just be out and during commute times, handing out bike lights to people. And so, there's a lot of things similar to that are opportunities to, add, elements of compliance with traffic laws and also education and encouragement for people.
Great, I think that's awesome. I'm really looking forward for that as well, because I do think this is the part that it's not gonna cost us millions as a city, but
Yeah.
has equally or even sometimes higher impact than others.
Yeah, and I think as well, speaking to just like cost, we started like, there's a very fluid federal environment right now. And there's the potential that cities won't be able to rely on traditional funding streams that have come their way in the past. And so I think that, as part of the work that we're doing, the project recommendations we're developing, we want to look at how can we help the city become more agile in the way that they do project delivery. And so, utilizing things, there's a process called a quick build, where you use more temporary materials to be able to get something on the road, and be able to kind of test it and to make sure that it's working before you rebuild it with concrete. But I think that as the state of funding emerges, there may be opportunities to do those types of treatments. But I think, speaking to this gentleman's previous concerns, also doing it in a way that's responsive and responsible for things like maintenance, because it doesn't do you any good to put up a quick build if then all the bollards get knocked down and and then you're left with nothing.
Great,
Thank you, Commissioner Wolf.
I have a few questions. One is, so we have this Vision Zero plan, and your plan will try to incorporate the principles, and there's, the way Vision Zero is set up, there's redundancy. One is education, education for the bicyclist, the pedestrian, and the driver. Is that, then there's infrastructure, changes that could make the road safer. Is that something that this plan is going to address comprehensively then, or are you going to try to tackle, we've had like 9 fatalities in the last, like 2012 and 2021, and like 83 KSIs.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get that down to 0. And is that something that the plan will attempt to address?
Well, I think we want to basically create a implementation mechanism for the city to pursue Vision Zero. So the Vision Zero plan laid out what are the key streets, what are the key intersections, what are the collision types that are taking place at those intersections. And then this is our opportunity to take the findings of those and turn those into actual projects that can directly address some of the collision factors that we've seen in the past from these collisions. But I think, to your point as well, around things like education and enforcement, of course, this plan doesn't do anything by itself. It requires action by the city. But I think what we want to do as well is to help kind of prioritize on their behalf, what, among this menu of all these different programmatic and educational options, what are the ones that would be the most effective for the city of Cupertino to pursue following this plan's adoption.
And then, as far as I think you kind of addressed in your presentation, as far, I've cycled for a long time and many miles, but there's this whole thing that I think I've seen it from the American Society of Civil Engineers, where there's people who will never cycle, and then there's hardcore cyclists at the other end of the spectrum who go on any road. But you're trying to really entice the people in the middle, and because I hear that, like, oh, nobody cycles on this road, why are we doing this? Well, if you build the infrastructure, they will cycle. I know that for a fact. But so is that something that, how would this plan incorporate that? Trying to get, not just looking at where things are being used, but also like we would want to make it safer for everyone, for all, you know, like complete streets, all ages and abilities.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the analysis that we'll be conducting, the level of traffic stress analysis, the stress adjusted short trips, really tries to get exactly at that, is to understand where there's the potential for people to be taking these walking and biking trips, but that they're not doing it today, largely because they don't feel safe or comfortable doing so. And how do we prioritize and understand the potential benefits that we get back by closing those gaps for those potential users? And then I think the other thing, just to kind of throw out there as well, is you know, we see this plan as an opportunity not just to benefit, you know, people that might want to try biking, but this plan also has the potential to benefit the people who would never bike. You know, if we can help people switch their trips for people where they have the choice to switch their trips, especially when we look at things like parking availability, that gives us the opportunity to free up parking for the people that do need to drive. And so when we look at folks like, you know, that are seniors or in the disability community, people that have, you know, advanced mobility challenges, where parking is absolutely necessary. You know, when we think about parking and parking availability, those are the big folks that we need to be thinking about first. And the more that we can shift trips for the people who have options to do so, helps ensure that those people's trips can also happen in a way that's convenient and successful.
All right, thank you, Wolfie.
I have one last question.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, please.
On the chart that you're showing,
Yes.
so how would you rank, you know, what Stevens Creek is today? LTS 4 on both pedestrian and bicyclists?
Well, you know, we need to run that analysis first, but I think different sections and segments of Stevens Creek, I would guess, will probably end up scoring differently.
Okay.
And so, you know, Stevens Creek has bike lanes for its whole length. And so, you know, I think that there's a really good chance that you're going to have a minimum of LTS 3 for those bike lanes. But of course, you know, there's also separate scoring for pedestrians, and the different roadway characteristics for pedestrians have different, you know, there's different scores. And I think especially when we look at streets that have things like what are called slip lanes, where you can make a turn at an intersection without having to go up to the signal, there's an extra crossing for a pedestrian to be able to get to that little island where they can then cross the street. Those are things that really influence, you know, the level of traffic stress for pedestrians.
So you think, you know, they're in LTS 3. So is the goal to take it to LTS 1, or what are we trying to do?
Well, I mean, I don't think we've established that goal yet, and that's part of the process that we want to go through with you, with the public. But I think, you know, we first of all want to understand what the analysis is telling us about the conditions today, and then to be able to use those, especially in conjunction with the Vision Zero safety analysis and the public input that we get to understand, you know, how we would want to update and modify the existing project recommendations, because we're also not starting from a blank slate. We have two, you know, very good and you know, partially implemented plans, the bicycle plan and pedestrian plan. And it's really revisiting those recommendations and understanding how do those need to be updated, both in terms of making them feasible projects and then also prioritizing them according to, you know, what the needs of the community are today.
All right, thank you. I have a bunch of questions similar to other commissioners, but before I you know, start going through that, I just wanted to understand the process. So all of the commissioners have been giving input. So I wanted to know, how does that get consolidated and set the direction for what you're going to do? Or if you want, what we could do is, like, are you going to listen to the recording, or is it, are you someone taking notes?
I've been taking notes on and off on my phone, so I'll certainly take those. I think to what extent you can, if you can provide that recording, we can run that through a transcript program to get a transcription of the meeting as well. And you know, I'm certainly happy to work with you, David, to kind of, you know, provide a report back on a lot of these questions.
We will all meet, you know, we have regular project meetings, so we'll all meet and discuss the comments and the concerns and questions of the commission, and discuss how to incorporate those as we can into the project as as it moves forward. You know, within the context of the scope of the budget that we've set, and we'll certainly can report back to the commission on. But we're certainly want to incorporate as much as we can for tonight.
Yeah, the other thing I could say to the commission is like, we could give guidelines, like high level summary, or, these are the 5 areas we wanted to see in the document, and then towards the end of it, we could have an action or a recommendation for the staff and the consultants. So that's also a possibility. Maybe we'll come back and discuss that, how you want to do that. That way you have a formal written guideline as well as a commission entity. All right, so with that, I would like to ask, a few questions. Like, you had a project schedule in there. Which one of that is, I know that it's really aggressive, so which one of that is going to the council versus which one of, because you said like council and commission hearings.
Yes, so of course, we're here tonight, and we are planning to come back to this commission in July when we have our draft recommendations. And I believe we also are planning to come back to this body in November as we prepare the draft plan.
Okay, so we have 3 hearings, and what's the one in April?
Well, that's tentative. So we haven't put down a date yet, but we are going to do a city council work session. And that's probably not going to be April. It's more like late summer. But we'll be doing that because we want to make sure that this gets in front of the council, that they know about it, that they feel comfortable with it before we try to bring a final plan to them for adoption.
That's a good idea. I think, it'll be good to have that. If you are not going to do it in April, it'll be good to have that after the next commission hearing, so that way you can collect the inputs from the commission as well, or recommendations to the council, if at all we have it,
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so that's regarding the second thing is on the roadmap that you have laid down, like various, plans that we have on table. One is the bicycle run and pedestrian plans, right? So the previous ones. More importantly, like we have the Vision Zero plan, like, I heard from the commissioners as well, right? Now, how do you plan to incorporate that? Because if you look at the previous plans, you had collected a bunch of data, like for example, 10 years worth of crash history.
Yeah.
And you have kind of parsed it and then, use that for prioritizing projects in there. So you don't have to do that because the Vision Zero plan is already in there.
That's right.
And local road safety plan is also already in there, which has data as well. And now the question is, what we would like to see here is, how are you going to use that information? And then come up, Vision Zero plan also gave you a toolbox saying that, okay, now these are the high injury networks, right? These are the intersections which are causing major problems, pedestrian or, the bicycle issues, right? So how are you going to address, are you going to make recommendations? But the toolbox doesn't tell you what to do in that particular intersection.
Right.
So this active transportation plan, if you're going to take those 10 high injury networks and then proposing projects 1 to 10 for the commission or council to, to take it forward, would you be giving more specific recommendations as opposed to the previous one gave a bunch of list of projects? And again, we have to go through the same process to identify the project. So are you going to give specific recommendations on what to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, we will not be getting down to like design detail for these projects, but yes, we will be as much as we can trying to align project recommendations and project updates with what's in the Vision Zero plan. We're still working on getting all of the data from the previous consultant TJKM, but having their full data sets of how they ran their analysis, how they organized and analyzed the collisions will be very helpful for us in developing recommendations that directly respond to those pieces. I think that as we talked about for the development of project recommendations, that's a very big piece of how we develop them. Is we have the safety analysis, we have the kind of the comfort and demand analysis through the LTS analysis, through the active trip potential analysis, and then we also can then filter in and feed in the public input that we get during this first phase. And it's kind of those 3 elements kind of combine to determine what are the project proposals that we want to bring back to the public.
Okay, that's good. The next one is an outreach.
Yeah.
So regarding the public outreach, right, so this is most important, right? We don't want it to, only one certain set of people coming in and providing inputs for the project. So how are we, as a staff as well as, how are we making sure that you get broad-based inputs? And I heard from business community, right? I heard from, you are going to have websites. How do we reach, like, can we reach to the block leaders? Can we reach to, what are the tools that reach to different people? Like using cities' public outreach mechanisms, like, if you have emails, you have Nextdoor, you have other, Instagram accounts, city accounts, right? How do you use those things to make sure that the first time when you go have a public meeting, you want to make sure that we get broad-based input as opposed to one specific set of people coming and giving in all the inputs, right?
Yeah, I think to a large extent, we're relying on our city partners to help us with communication and kind of visibility with the public. I think to what extent you all as well are able to provide either your own connections or your own recommendations. We want to take those things in. I think we have a very strong interest in making sure people feel like they know this is happening and that they have an opportunity to provide input.
The other one is on the analysis part, right? So one is Vision Zero gives you the previous trash data and going forward, but I also heard how about the past projects, what we have built already in the previous 26, you showed like, I think about like 22 pedestrian plans and 34 bicycle plans, either completed or in progress, right?
Yeah.
So those ones, how are you going to take input from those projects that are completed and bring that to the table so that drives your recommendations? Is there a way to?
I think I want to better understand your question. So there's a series of projects that cities completed
Correct.
already. And I guess my question then is what
What
would you like to
what work, what are the gaps, and can we address that going forward? We don't want to have a list of projects there and we go on repeat the same thing again.
I see.
I
So
think a lot of that's going to be driven by what we hear through our outreach efforts from users of the facilities, kind of like heard from Commissioner Maripala earlier. We don't have a way to go out and evaluate in the field the effectiveness.
So staff doesn't have any kind of.
So we'd be relying on either data from incidents that may have occurred, but just mostly we want to hear from user experiences. And that's going to be driven a lot by the outreach.
Maybe that's something you could do is like, for example, you already have data, like 10 years worth of crash data from Vision Zero. Now you can parse out saying that, okay, which one of those things happened on the existing improvements that already happened? And then possibly that will give you an indication of, okay, we did this $11 million project. What did we achieve, right? So that's the kind of, you should be able to go and collect the data.
Is there a way from the kind of more modern projects we did, like, I know we have put this bicycle cameras in place between Stevens Creek Boulevard and Wolf. Is there a way to actually measure the use capacity and the use of those lanes? Just even if we haven't measured it in the past, I think it would be good practice to know anyway, what's the usage pattern during the day, what's the usage pattern during the month and whatnot there, and have some real data that we can use to drive some of those. Because that also kind of answers maybe, is it actually increasing significantly, is the use increasing significantly, which is an encouragement, or is the use actually deteriorating because people are not happy with the implementation of whatever the issue may be? Those are camera-based systems. We should have that data somehow accessible.
Some of the cameras have the capability to collect like bicycle volumes and things such as that. So we can certainly leverage that.
That'd be awesome.
there is technology available to do things like bicycle and pedestrian counts with there's like in pavement counters that can be put. And so like I used to work for the city of San Francisco. The city of San Francisco maintains, I think, at 38 different locations in pavement counters where when a someone, and with the metal wheel goes over that magnetic strip, it will be an account then.
I'm not sure if you have this available, but I mean, we have a time frame, so I don't know what's the practical matters are.
I think from a data collection standpoint, for this plan, there's not really a sufficient time window to then also do data collection to then help inform the plan recommendations. I think to what extent there's existent data, we want to pull that in. And I think there's the opportunity to develop, programmatic recommendations around creation of some sort of monitoring account program. And, the technology for that is getting more agile by the year. There are a few companies based in Belgium where you can actually buy, it's run through like a Raspberry Pi, hard drive, and you can just set up a webcam in your window. And it has the capacity to do traffic counts and differentiate between vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians, and even do stuff like speed tracking. So you can see, how fast people are going on the street. What's the 85th percentile? Are people traveling at different speeds at different times of day? There's the potential to do those things, and that technology is only growing right now.
Okay, thank you. I think I just take it as in addition to infrastructure improvements, we're also asking for monitoring improvements or any tools available for that. Right. Okay, so the next one is on these data that you have on the stress test, right? So can you also overlay the existing data, right, the crash data and so on, to find out, is that what we are seeing, or do you also have future projections going forward? Is that based on past data or is it based on future?
So for something like this,
Yeah.
so this is based on existing conditions.
Okay.
Yes. And so this will be able to give us a snapshot of what conditions look like and feel like for, people walking, for biking.
Would you also overlay future projections? For example, like there's another agenda item that's going to come up in this meeting, which is about the Stevens Creek Corridor Vision Study, right? So, which means that, are you also looking at other futuristic data to bring forward in this?
So there's the ability to be able to look at changes in LTS due to, project network recommendations. That's not something we're currently scoped to provide.
Okay. All right, so I think I've taken so much of time, so I'll stop here and I'll come back to the second round. So I wanted to go with the commissioners again for the second round to see if you have any additional inputs. Commissioner Mas. No, I don't have any.
So I do have one question.
Please.
It's an engineering type question. It's like, so you're dealing with existing cities all the time.
Yes.
And then you must have to make compromises. And I'll bring up one.
All the time.
With McClellan Street, McClellan, we have this protected bikeway there.
Yeah.
And you look at it, it's insufficient. It's not wide enough for the standard bikeway. And I bike it all the time. I know, I understand the complaints, but I also understand the benefits. How do you, from a design standpoint, will you be weighing these factors? You look at it, well, yeah, it's gonna slow down cyclists but it's gonna be safer for kids to bike to school. I mean, in fact, a young person is killed on that, I think. So that's really something I'd be interested in, because I'm a civil engineer and I know I'm not a transportation engineer, but there's always trade-offs, you can't get a perfect solution. Somebody's gonna be complaining about something.
Yeah.
So I wonder, how do you, handle this in a bike plan? Do you follow all the criteria to the T, or do you?
So, I think that there's definitely a bit of art to it. You're always constrained by what is your right of way, it's like it's almost impossible. And when it is possible, very expensive to acquire private property to expand your right of way for something. And so, when we look at how do we design facilities, this is usually not something that happens at the plan, at a citywide plan level, to a detailed degree. But when you order projects, there's always a very involved design process that really does kind of look at, what are all of the trade-off factors and how do you try to balance things in appropriate ways. And you have to then make a lot of design decisions, and some of those are compromises. I think to the extent for this plan, we are going to be kind of doing a very high level, feasibility screening for the types of recommendations that we put together to, understand at a high level, is there enough space in the street to do this? We've already kind of validated with the city kind of what their preferences and needs and requirements are in terms of minimum facility width, certain types of devices that the city does or doesn't use. And so we want to be able to use that to develop recommendations for them that are actually feasible. Because the worst thing that we can do is say, like, oh, you should put a protected bike lane on this street, and then the city comes back 2 years later to try to build that and figures out like, oh, this street isn't wide enough for the type of facility that is to our standards. And so that's what, like, the last thing that we want to do. We want to make sure that we set the city up to actually have a successful path forward when they do get to that project on the list.
But you take an accident data, for instance, on McCullen, there's a lot of kids who've been hit.
Yep.
One person died, including my own son was hit there when he was in middle school on McCullen. It's just so much traffic
Yeah.
and such erratic driving. And I look at it and say, well, that's the solution that's there is not really ideal, but it's the best thing for young children.
Yeah.
I mean, is that?
That absolutely goes into the considerations. Yes, absolutely. And so, I think it is, balancing all of these different and competing needs, both the needs for operations within the roadway, but then also these larger goals and needs around things like safety.
Great. Question that might be also for David, but that ties back into the previous question. What's the level of commitment that the city is putting? Like, if, for example, this plan goes to city council, and for example, we have like the plan covers the next 5 years. We look back in 5 years, we haven't done anything. Oops, stuff like didn't work out. Like, who would be then held accountable for that? Like, what's the level of commitment that the city is putting on itself for the projects that are going to be mentioned?
Well, that's a function of a lot of variables that we don't have the answer to right now. So, the process every year is recommendations are made for capital improvement projects, either by staff or when we come to commissions for advice, or however the idea gets started. There's a list of proposed projects for the CIP, and some of those are drawn from bike plans, some from PED plans, some from other sources that the city has, and then staff compiles that list and take that information to the city council as recommendations, and then the city council will review the list and prioritize and decide which projects move forward based upon what they hear from the community, based upon the current fiscal situation of the city, based upon the types of outside funding sources staff has been able to identify. So there's a lot of factors that go in. I mean, every year since the bike plan has been adopted, we've tried to go forward with, several bike and or PED projects, each year, which is why we've finished 20 some odd or more of the projects.
32 between the two plans, yeah.
Right. And,
It's about a quarter of all plan recommendations.
it's a hefty part of the CIP. And how successful we are getting those approved. I mean, the better we are at identifying grant funding, the more likely a project's going to be looked at by the council and forward, especially city financial situation. So, it's not a question I can answer. I can tell you that we all want to see these projects forward, and collectively we're going to try to do what we can to ensure that they are reviewed favorably by the community and the council, so they provide the support to move it.
But I think adding on to that, part of what we'll be providing as part of the final plan is what we would call implementation packages of the highest priority projects where we've done some additional level of due diligence in terms of scoping and design. And really that's for the purpose of making sure that staff can speak with confidence when they bring those projects as part of the CIP process, to be able to say, you know, to have that high degree of confidence in its feasibility, in what the potential cost is going to be. Those are all things that help make that an easier decision for the city council to approve those as projects.
And just to add, like when we apply for the grants, like HSIP grants or Measure B grants, so once we have this project and all the information, it will be useful to put the application quickly or something.
All right, yeah, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So does your plan and recommendation change depending on what Stevens Creek ends up being? So for example, if it ends up shaping up to be something like, Santana Road type of environment, like where there are a lot of shops and a lot of activity, versus, it ends up being just rows and rows of houses, does your plan change? Because the reason I'm asking is, Mayor, state of the city address, she said, yes, we ideally want to see the ground floor to be, retail and, the upper floors to be homes. But most of the applications that are getting submitted, no retail at all. They want everything housing, right? So there is a desire for city council and the city to evolve in a certain way, but then the developers are choosing to do something different. So how does that affect, your recommendation?
Well, I mean, look, the housing element is certainly one thing that we look at when trying to think about future demand for these types of streets. I think with a street like Stevens Creek Boulevard, though, the type of use that takes place on that doesn't change a lot for what you look at in terms of the high level recommendations. It does change how you approach some of the design elements. For example, if there's more businesses on those streets, you need to be looking at accommodation of loading more often, because there's more likelihood that there's going to be, delivery trucks or DoorDash drivers or other people. And so that then becomes more a question of how do you do curb management effectively as part of your design process? Does that change what type of bikeway recommendation you make? Not a lot. I think that with a street like Stevens Creek Boulevard, we want to strive to be able to meet a minimum of safety and comfort, both for bicyclists and pedestrians. But then, it becomes a question of what additional guidance can we provide in terms of, what's your design for that individual project when you get to it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. So there's one or two questions I have, but before that, and after that, we'll go through, what should be the guidelines that we should give. I personally think that we should give a return recommendation. It would be like a major category or high level bullets. That way, there is a return action from the commission for the city staff and the consultants to work on. That's my take, but I will listen to the commission. Okay, so on the Vision Zero, right? I also there is a task force that's supposed to be formed, which is collecting inputs from the stakeholders and then kind of managing that project parallel. But in your project, you're only looking at the existing plan, which is already done in 2020, last year. So is there a plan for intersecting that? Like if Vision Zero progresses, when we progress this year, then you should be able to take input. That's also an additional input to the to this roadmap, right?
If we receive input related to Vision Zero, and it pertains, it's relevant to what we're doing, certainly try to integrate that feedback.
I think that should be included in your scope, basically, when you're providing. The last one is on the school safety. Like we talked about many areas, like so if you can really identify areas that are school zones, because it's really important for us to make it safer for the kids to go to who are major users, right?
Yeah.
And that would be good. You didn't call out specifically on this.
And we've got them on this map right
Oh,
here.
I see. Okay.
'Cause, yeah, we have all of the schools identified for their locations. And I think that as we develop network recommendations, that's something we want to influence what we look at. But I think I take your point that we should be also communicating that more. Kind of our focus on schools and school safety and family safety.
I think it would be, I hadn't seen that on the plan either, but also communicating with CUSD and the schools, I think would be also very important. I'm gonna respectfully disagree about the implementation of the task force, because I think the plan has already been, the Vision Zero plan has already been accepted by City Council. And so that's something that should already happen, that we don't need to put back into another plan, if that makes sense. So.
It's not putting in the plan, basically it's an additional input, because that's like input from stakeholders.
From the
Yeah.
task force?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because that has multiple different stakeholders. It could be from the sheriff's department, it could be from the fire department and other people who are looking at the safety of the, in general, the city.
Yeah. Those are all very stakeholders when we talk about being able to successfully deliver projects as well. I can't tell you how many meetings I had with San Francisco Fire Department when I was working for Muni. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, we heard like saying that, there was a fire truck was not able to, or emergency vehicles were not able to go through the McLaren. So which means that it's good to get the input from the stakeholders who will
Absolutely.
provide you the right data, right?
We've got a long list of stakeholders that we will be reaching out directly to as part of this process.
Okay. All right, so with that, we will come back to the providing a collective input as a commission. So how do we, maybe you can open up as usual, right? So we can bring up the document and we can start typing up the bullet points, then we can agree on.
You want to form a motion?
That's correct. I can start if you want, I can start the structure, but otherwise any one of you can provide input. So I just go by the same category of inputs so far the commissioners have given. One is like looking at the past projects and providing input into the plan, right? Active transportation plan. That's one thing.
Hold on 1 second, let's make sure.
Yep.
So looking at past projects and providing input,
Yeah, basically data to drive the inputs, basically.
data-driven input.
Yeah, exactly. Data driven from
Providing
data from past projects.
Providing data,
data from the past projects.
Yeah. Yeah, data from past projects.
Providing inputs in ATP.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
The second one is on the public outreach. How to make it broader. I mean, we talked about many things like stakeholders and so on. So you include all of that in that.
Especially during the draft phase, that's probably the part that's completely missing in the current plan. Or at least in the communication that we saw today.
But
what was yours?
the question is for me is that we say broaden the public outreach, but I think from a project plan standpoint, we haven't received the list of, maybe first we should receive the list before we ask to broaden it.
No, the thing is like we already have, they have a roadmap in schedule when the public is going to provide input, which means that we need to proactively go and solicit inputs.
Yeah, I understand that, but like we're talking, for example, about CUSD or fire departments, like is that list somewhere to find, like all the stakeholders that you're going to be involved into the project?
In fact, that was not.
Yeah, we have a temporary list of stakeholders identified to engage, so that does exist. And then, so what is the broader about the outreach period?
So in general, like for example, you're going to have an outreach when the public engagement phase is coming in May.
Yeah.
So are we making sure that all this, you are collecting from broader part of the city?
Yeah, we're gonna have a really robust engagement effort, pushing everything through our city channels, handing out flyers at local businesses. As to your point earlier, one of the commissioners' point, we're gonna be notifying Apple and giving them the web map that's created so that their employees are able to provide input. And we're gonna be posting A-frames outside of all city buildings with QR codes directing folks to the website. Communications to FUHSD and CUSD. As well as the sheriff's department and a longer list of stakeholders that were identified.
Yeah, it's all should.
Danza College will be notified, yeah.
Okay, so this is already part of your plan.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, and when you say that you'll go reach out to schools, will they also have to come to this meeting to provide input, or is it like you have other?
They can collect input online. We have a web map that will allow them to kind of draw lines and place points and then add written comments about specific areas that they find challenging or would like improved. But it would be beneficial if they came, so we're gonna be providing them with the meeting notices in advance. So the community is gonna be hopefully well aware that we're hosting both the online and in-person workshops.
Okay. So the next one at least I saw is like, it's not only the infrastructure improvement, but also additional data collection. It needs to be integrated as part of it so that in future, if you're doing projects, you'll be able to continuously receive data that can help. So it's not just the roadway infrastructure, but also any other improvements you're doing, electronic inputs, like I heard from Commissioner Eshelberg as well.
So just to clarify is, we're not gonna be able to incorporate new data collection efforts into the scope,
Not efforts.
but we can use existing data that we might have to help
I
inform.
think there's 2 points. I think one is use existing data that you have for developing the plan. And then there is every new project that's being built should facilitate the collection of data.
Include in it. You know, if you're making a signaling, an intersection improvement, make sure that that project also includes data collection, so that could provide you data for further improvements in future. So it's part of the infrastructure.
Does that look good?
Yep. Education was another thing
Just
that
a
came up.
question about that, because we're asking for facilitating data collection, that tends to extend the scope and complexity of projects, so maybe David.
So this would be a general recommendation plan. The plan isn't gonna get into the design details of data collection for each improvement. It's just gonna be one of those kind of programmatic things that thou shall do this when you build these infrastructure projects.
Understood. If you look at it, Vision Zero actually is data-driven program, so it recommends you to collect data. So what we are saying is when you're picking up a project for CIP, it's not just only, you don't have to go back and hire another consultant to figure out what to collect data. This kind of gives you an indication already. So the next one is on, incorporate the Vision Zero inputs. That includes existing data.
Yeah, that's one of the core objectives of the plan. When we published the RFP for the project, we wanted to make sure that we were elevating the Vision Zero plan. So that would be our main safety plan. And then this document will then serve as the kind of project delivery mechanism for the city.
Okay. And then the next one is on the different usage scenarios. Like I saw points of interest, as well as we talked about schools. Commute versus schools, different type of users. I think you need to incorporate that when you are identifying projects as well.
Different use what?
Different usage.
Different usage.
And that's something that can be captured during our outreach. We can create some questions to kind of gauge how people are traveling and for what purpose.
Exactly, right.
It's not really usage, I think it's more persona, is what you're
like a different profiles.
Profiles.
Different profiles.
Switch to profiles. Appropriate.
Different profiles of users, like pedestrians and bicyclists, yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, it could be outreach or, consultants will collect it from wherever sources, they have, yeah. You're not,
Say exactly what you want us to say.
just simply say that incorporate different profiles of users as part of the data collection, yeah. And we also heard, incorporate low hanging fruits, like it's not only go after the highest expensive projects, but also for the lower ones.
Yeah, and we emphasize that in our kickoff meeting to prioritize those low cost projects that could have the greatest potential impact and also be implemented quickly.
So Chris also mentioned about, I think, quick build programs and things like that, right? So where you have maximum impact at less cost, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Does that automatically speak to the notion of non-infrastructure project? Because I think there's infrastructure projects which we naturally focus on,
The education.
but there's many non-infrastructure projects that I think, in my opinion, should be 50-50 the plan.
Maybe we should put that in there, the non-infra projects as well. A separate item, non-infra project, it could includes education, it could be signage and so on, right? Yeah.
So tell us exactly what you want us to
I
say.
think there was a name to technical,
Non-infrastructure.
non-infrastructure.
Significant focus on non-infrastructure related projects.
Is that for the former bullet?
This one.
I think it can be a separate point.
Separate point is good, actually, guys. That way it gets its focus, yeah.
This looks good, significant focus on non.
Yeah. It's good.
The other thing I'm seeing is like in the pedestrian, if you look at the Vision Zero, it said that pedestrian related crashes are kind of going high. Not only in our city, but also throughout the nation. So the question is like, we need to, I know, focus a lot on bicycle projects. And even I saw the previous data you mentioned is more number of bicycle projects were completed compared to pedestrian. But the pedestrian related high injury crashes are going high. So which means that we should try to see, balance it out by saying, giving focus to pedestrian projects as well. Equally or better,
Focus to
Pedestrian.
pedestrian projects as well.
Pedestrian projects
Yeah.
in addition to.
I think a lot of that will be borne out during the discussion we'll have in July around how we do prioritization for projects, but I agree, that's definitely a goal that we
Yeah.
have as well for the project.
That's perfect.
I think historically, projects we implemented have been predominantly bicycle.
Bicycle, because I see that in commission, I've been in the
Yeah.
commission for the last for 5 years now.
Yeah.
And pretty much like the talk is majority. I mean, I'm not saying pedestrian doesn't come up, but most of it is there, but the data shows the other way. And also if there is a crash happening for a pedestrian, that's actually highly likely it's high injury or a fatal crash. So you're helpless. So that's, in fact, last couple of weeks ago, there was a crash on Torrey Avenue on Rodriguez, which I think that in the previous meeting, one of the public came and said that there is an issue in the Torrey Avenue. And I saw it, like I just reached that location few minutes after the crash happened. After that, I just stay there to watch for it. Like people in the evenings, they are busy and then they keep going and they don't follow the stop sign properly, rolling stops. Pedestrians are crossing and, motorists are just driving. It's kind of, even in spite of that happened, right? It's the kind of problem waiting to happen. So I think that's why actually it's good to have focus on pedestrian as well. It's not more expensive, but you should be able to do it. All right, so I'll stop there. I think this is a good list. If you have any commissioners, do you have any other points that we missed out here?
Yeah, I have a couple of things that I brought up earlier. I would like to understand, what does it mean to mix, different types of devices? on these bike lanes. Like,
Next,
yeah, bikes and scooters and an whole bunch of things, right? So if it's there, that's the case, there's a need to overtake each other and all that stuff, how it, so what's the bit, that we need and that kind of thing, just needs to be thought through and studied.
so
That's.
so instead of understanding.
Yeah, implications of, mixing various types of, transportation in the bike lanes, right? So, okay, it's given, right? So that's gonna happen, right? So we need to do it in a way that, we can accommodate. So that's one. The other one is, maintenance of it, right? I think that needs to be sorted out.
What you said?
Maintenance, yeah.
Maintenance of existing infrastructure.
Yeah, even the new ones that we are putting in, maintenance has to be thought to. I don't think,
Oh, okay.
there is any maintenance being done on McClellan's separated bike lane. That's causing different kind of problems where, the bikers are avoiding that lane and, going into the car lanes. Because there's so much debris during rainy season. And then the last one, quite a few cities are removing, separated bike lanes. We need to understand why, what's going on. Yeah, I don't want us to do something and then come back and undo it.
What exactly would you like to say, please?
So study why other cities are removing separated bike lanes. I gave San Mateo is one of them. Right? There are a couple of other examples that I know.
Right.
Just a question on the understanding the mixed device such as scooters and various type of transportation, because so far it doesn't strike me as a source of conflict. Like collision with cars is well documented. We had like, a bunch of things, but so far scooters and bikes have a similar profile. So what
So they have a need to overtake each other and all that, right? So yeah, so are we building this wide enough, to accommodate all types of devices?
So instead of understand, maybe we should give a direction to the study mixed use devices or bring data or
Understand and study.
or simply say study, right? Study mixed devices while making a recommendation, right? Or
Study mixed devices such as scooters and various types of transportation while making what?
Recommendations.
While making recommendations. And then we'll need to fix this part here. So we recommend to the city council to,
no, it's not the council at this time. It's basically the recommendation to the staff and the consultants. Is there anything that you have on structure of the document? What would you like to see?
I know we talked about the broadening the public outreach, but I have to come back to this slide here. It shows absolutely no outreach from the time a draft is available. We really have to make sure that there is robust, this is probably the most important time, to have robust outreach during the time. So maybe I can specifically mention that there is a need for robust outreach during the draft phase.
Yeah, just to note that graph only shows like the workshop events or the direct engagement to the public. We're still going to be messaging to the public through the city channels and passively through flyers and things, notifying everyone that the document's available. So that's really more as it relates to the staffing for outreach events.
Yeah, so maybe that's a little bit misleading, but I just wanted to make this captured here so that it's really understood and agreed upon. Absolutely. There has to be, I think this is probably the most important phase to the draft phase.
Yeah, one thing is like outreach when we talk about, right? So today we have this meeting. We don't see a single person from the public here. It's a public hearing. As per your schedule as well, right? But we don't have any one from the public representing us here, right? So that's another thing. So which means that we did not reach out well for them to really be here. Yes, the agenda is published, but then nobody knows.
You can bring a horse to water, Elango.
No.
So we will certainly outreach exhaustively, but
We also, we haven't launched our.
We haven't,
We haven't started our messaging.
We need to start somewhere.
Really, it was that we wanted to make sure we came to you first.
It's still very abstract. I think once the draft is there, then people have concrete feedback to give and input and specific based on their areas they are seeing feedback and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's why I think this is super important to.
I'd like to see something in the, as far as current, let's see. And the goal should be, this active transportation plan should be to reduce congestion by encouraging cycling, the infrastructure should encourage cycling and walking of all ages. And so that should be always there, I think, as far as what this plan shows. And it should also encourage reduction of greenhouse gases.
So in general, we can say education and encouragement,
In addition,
right? I don't know how this plan is going to solve this, but.
real quick, for that last point, encouraging cycling and what?
Reduce congestion by encouraging cycling and walking. Automobile congestion, that was.
Cycling and walking.
You're going
And-
said encourage cycling and walking. But I would say by position to using personal cars,
As opposed to you,
well, as opposed to using like
as opposed to using
like individual
emission,
cars.
what would you say?
It's using individual vehicles, so reducing the congestion
As
by
opposed to
encouraging
using
cycling.
individual, it's like a single rider,
Yes, exactly. That's
individual.
individual vehicles or cars or.
And it was using single rider vehicles. Single rider. Of hiking. Rider. Yep.
I don't know if we need to say it then directly, it's, this plan should reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
The plan. We should say the plan.
Is that implied in the previous statement?
That's not really within the scope of the,
By.
it's a nice side benefit, but it's
Okay, I agree with you. That's actually.
not a focus of this particular plan.
It could go with the item just above. I mean, it's.
And that's something I think, yeah, we could put it in there when we discuss the prioritization. If that's a category that you'd like to be considered in terms of the priority of a project and how, even though that's not really going to
Will
be,
the climate
it's not going to be quantitatively evaluated in terms of this plan, the amount of climate reduction potential.
Well,
Well, the climate action plan already focuses on that, I think, so.
So I think this-
has benefit, but I don't think it has to be in there.
Yeah, because
I don't think there's just any active transportation plan, that should be like, in this day and age, should be priority.
Well, any active transportation is going to positively impact greenhouse gas.
That's true, but you have to, it should be you're trying to develop a plan which encourages everyone to get out and walk and drive. You can put an active transportation plan together, which doesn't do any of those things, really. It doesn't encourage people to, because it's not a good, it's not the focus of it.
And our plan, or the project does include policy and programmatic recommendations that will be developed that kind of touch on a lot of these items that are being included as part of this motion. So the complete scope is much more robust than what was presented before you today, so.
Yeah, I just want to say, we're not going to be doing greenhouse gas emission.
I understand.
Calculations.
That's what I understand.
No, but encourage people, like, what do we do to encourage? Like, do we give incentives? Is that the incentive? Because, if we make things easy, people will naturally start using it. That's the approach we are trying to make, right? But beyond that, encourage, we cannot force people to do what they don't want to do, right?
mean, it's fine. I mean, you're making it safer, right? Making the roadways safer.
Yes.
Bringing the crash down to zero, right? So injury crashes. So those are the kind of things that we do to encourage people to use it. It's more of a general direction than what can we put in the specific project itself to encourage people to use it. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, anything else? I think that's a good list. Do you think that commissioners, do you have anything else to add? Are we ready to make any modification to the bullets, or are we okay to vote? If so, like, I would like to have who would like to move the motions.
So I just want to set expectations. So what staff's gonna do is we'll discuss this list with Chris and the consultant to see how these items can be integrated. Plan. That said, we have a scope and budget already for the plan that the consultant has prepared to move forward with. So to the extent that we can incorporate these items, so they align with what more or less with what we've scoped, or we can incorporate without incurring additional budget, we'll do. If we come into conflict and find out that some of these items are going to cost more than we've budgeted or out of scope, we can come back to the commission and say, we got to not do something if we want to do this, and then we can have that discussion at the time. So I just want there to be understanding that we're going into this with the scope and contract already executed with the consultant. So, but we'll do our best, because I understand we want to make a document that the commission and the community is happy with and with the supports.
Understood. We don't want to just come here and then everybody says something and then we just walk away. All right.
Yeah.
We have a formal recommendation from the commission.
Mhm.
And if you think that, it crosses the budget, I mean, I think most of it is there, but we want to capture in the broader category, right? So if something is missing, we can always make recommendation to the council when it goes to the council to increase the budget, or we can drop some priorities.
And also, kind of a framework for, getting it through, right? Like, if these things are addressed, then most likely, it's going to be a 5-0 vote, right? Otherwise, they're going to be like, we have all these open issues and I'm not sure now I want to support that.
I want that as much as you. I just can't give $400,000 worth of work to a consultant that's going to be paid for 3 years. That's awesome.
So
Well, let's come back. If this comes
Yeah.
up, let's talk about
I
it.
think we're okay. But I just have to put that.
I just want to ask one last thing, like the structure of the document, have you asked for specific recommendations? At least I was mentioning that one. What recommendations are you going to bring forward?
So within the structure of the plan document, I mean, I could certainly provide a more detailed kind of summary to David after this meeting. But generally, we will have a set of project recommendations, both for bicycles and pedestrians. And that list of projects will then be prioritized, and also cost estimates developed and feasibility assessment for the highest priority projects. And then we will also have a set of programmatic recommendations for all of the non-infrastructure needs, as well as a set of policy recommendations for essentially for the city to be able to pursue for things like helping to streamline their project delivery process or improve the way that they approach projects.
Okay, so I think maybe you want to spell that out, right? Which did not come out clearly. So what you said is infrastructure recommendations, programmatic recommendations, and policy recommendations. So those are the 3 things that we would like to see in
That's in our scope.
your scope. Okay.
That is clearly laid out in the contract.
Yes, got it. Okay.
One suggestion I would like to make on the motion is this study why other cities are removing separate bike lanes. It looks to me a little bit like we're in the solution named already. And I would like to keep it a little bit broader and understand why other cities change their plans or they remove some of the things that didn't work. I think David has some experience with crosswalks, which the city of Cupertino put somewhere and that didn't work and they were removed. So I'd like to keep the topic broader as opposed to specifically on bike lanes so that we also understand, for example, for pedestrian projects, that's something that's, also can be changed in the future, and why we understand why these projects failed. So keep it broad.
So basically what we're saying is like bring data from our other cities. This is like
It can be pipelines, but it can be also something else. It doesn't have, because otherwise we're just narrowing the scope into just bike lanes.
Maybe we phrase it, study why the cities are removing separate bike lanes and changing infrastructure.
Okay,
Or changing original plans, I think.
and
Changing original plans.
I want to avoid, like, the separated bike lanes is also very specific, I think, so I just want to keep it broad, so
Well,
that.
that was brought up as a specific example, so I think it's worthwhile to study it specifically. Because it is on the table, I mean, it's.
their original plans, THEI.
Yeah, this has been coming up in the recent from the community input, because we are laying out projects on, this came up during the Stevenswick Boulevard issue that came to the commission as well. So it's good to understand what it is. And that way you have a data to go and say why we are doing and why we are not doing it. Right. Right. So who would like to move the motion?
I move to approve the motion as it is on the screen.
Second, please.
But that's the original X is up. And we'll change it to vice chairman. CHEN. CHEN, TECK.
ECK. Thank you.
Bongo.
So, no, who is the second? It's good for some.
Yeah, I'll second.
Yeah, the chair, I would like to give opportunity to the commissioners before I say I wanted to see. Okay, so,
Go after. Two people.
Consultants from what, right, to incorporate the following guidelines or to,
To incorporate the following.
yeah, exactly. To incorporate,
Vice chair.
maybe, should, one edit there, to incorporate the following feedback.
Finish the sentence with incorporate, to incorporate the following feedback. Into the plan.
Well,
Back to ATP.
let's correct that. Good.
No, into the plan or into ATP.
Into the plan, is that what you want to say? Versus the plan.
ATPs.
The ATP plan.
Just ATP.
Oh, ATP?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, because plan is what he stands for.
He is the plan.
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Any discussion on the motion? So if none, David, can you please help us take the vote?
Yes, Chair, for the motion on the, how do you vote, Chair Ganga?
Yes.
Vice Chair Eshelbeck?
Yes.
Commissioner Maipatla?
Yes.
Commissioner Marcy?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous.
And then take a second about.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll be seeing a lot more of me, and I will leave just a small stack of business cards here as well. So,
So there is a, thank you very much.
yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
So we are at 9 o'clock right now, and we have another meaty topic coming up, and I just want to make sure that we give justice to that topic. We knew that two major items are coming up, and I and David discussed it at that time as well. So I wanted to see if the commissioners would you be able to stay longer. I don't know how long it's going to take, but
As long as.
Unless, you know, it's time.
if not, then I would.
Presentation's about 15 minutes.
Yeah,
Oh, is it? That's not.
No, if it's not time sensitive, I propose that we take it up in the next meeting because it's definitely, requires, tons of understanding and stuff like that.
So it isn't time sensitive. We were anticipating taking the council on the 15th of April, which is before the next meeting. However,
Could we do an emergency meeting?
we could potentially take it to council and,
No, we can do a meeting,
You can do a special.
or you could have a
special
special
meeting,
meeting.
yeah, by Thursday.
If there's a availability for the room. And
So is it on the agenda for April 15?
it's tentatively scheduled for the agenda.
And is there any timing?
It can be moved.
Or can there,
There's another council date that is available.
I would prefer, because it's going to take more time, and I would like to give the commission to really spend time to make the recommendation. It's a really a major plan. So I would see if any of the commissioners want to proceed, or if you wanted to postpone it, then in that case, I would need a motion.
I prefer postponing, given, how big the topic is.
Then I would be in favor of postponing.
Okay,
And if you need to do a special meeting, we can do that.
so I would like to have a motion.
Take all this
If
out.
everybody is agreeing to it, I can just do a voice vote and then.
They haven't set a date yet.
Yeah.
I see that everybody is agreeing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Items.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to get on council in May
The next.
and June.
Okay, we can do a special meeting.
Special meeting.
Yeah, let's do a special meeting.
We just put BPC on it.
Okay, we probably have to do it soon, so we have
Yeah.
to get a council report together for
Okay,
the.
let's do that. So we can skip the,
I see unanimously all commissioners are requesting for postponement, so I would really like to do that, and we'll figure out what's the logistics to get it back onto the commission and to the council.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so it's always possible to push it 2 weeks out to the council as well, right?
It depends on their schedule. They can't
Well,
speak for the council.
based on that, we'll either make a special meeting, or if it's not possible, then we will do a in the next meeting. And we can put that as the first topic. Yeah. So we are postponing that item number 2 or 3, right?
3, yeah.
And then with that, the next one is actually staff and commission reports.
So just.
I have no staff report.
You?
Hmm?
Do you have
I do not have a staff.
so any commissioner reports? Okay, so I just have, maybe I'll quickly summarize it, like, we had the mayor's meeting today. So where this is the first time for this year where all the commission chairs were there in the meeting to make the brief update on what each commission is doing. So there's a large report, like bunch bullets in there. So the idea is I will just summarize in the interest of time, the major things, like the public safety issue was brought up because that was, looks like it was also a public made oral comments in the council meeting yesterday, as well as there were also similar issues raised in the public safety commission as well. So in general, like burglary and thefts are happening, so the people talked about that. So anything, if you're interested, you can provide inputs to the public safety commission. Then there was talk about the planning commission where 2 Westport project, they are requesting for some changes to it. And that might be coming up for the planning commission for review shortly. And then there were questions about parks and recreation as well. So some additional improvements programs coming up there. And the next one is like Earth Day and the new some of the cultural things that are coming up. So that was discussed as well. So in fact, one of the items that came up was also like, you know, there's also a so what, you know, we have a bike, what is it? The
Like the work day.
bike to work day as well,
Bike-
right? Yeah.
bike to it.
Anywhere day, yeah, exactly. So there were a few items that were shown, like, you know, these are the various events that are happening in the city kind of thing. So anyway, so that's the major thing. I took away is like, you know, the public safety was a major thing that came up where multiple people were raising concerns about that one. And if you have any inputs, you can take it back to either the council or to the Public Safety Commission. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, no, I did take to like, I spoke, one of the people that I spoke up in the whole communication yesterday on the public safety issue. At least I know 5 burglaries that in my friend circle in last 1 week, broken into homes. And so that was shocking. So that's why I went and spoke about a city council meeting yesterday.
Okay, and one thing that was mentioned in the meeting as well, like in fact, Mayor was bringing this up, specifically about the bicycle pedestrian commission. She wants to, in fact, I was raising this issue in the last meeting as well. Wants to see the agenda packet with the materials posted, so that people who are interested in the commission can look at it. Example, I would say, like, you know, since we have the consultants, at least one of the materials was already posted. Like whereas the other agenda item, the material was not posted. So you may want to at least post it Friday before the meeting, so that people have time to grasp what's going on and the way Mayor was projecting it is we have a practice of not posting materials as part of the package. So I think I'm sure like the city manager took a note of that one as well. So we want to make sure that we do post materials before the meeting. That's the request I have of staff, and that was discussed in the.
I would just add to that during the commissioner training. One of the other commissions had a suggestion that sometimes they're getting major documents the week before their commission meeting. They don't have enough time to go through it. And so that's something that I think the city manager said she would look into, but I think other commissions sometimes experience a problem with a major document coming and we get it on a Thursday and our meeting on Wednesday, you'd like to have sufficient time to look at it.
Yeah, especially like the ones in general, that's a generic statement, but for us, like if you are bringing the draft plan, right, for the ATP, so it's good to post it well ahead of time so that you really get meaningful inputs. All right, so that's all I had. Anything else on? Okay, so none. The next one is the future agenda item.
One.
Yeah, you can take out the yellow marked one. I mean, I'm sure like, July and November, that's fine. And maybe you can write down the Stevens Street corridor visions to me. That will be the one which comes in.
In March.
April or special meeting, we'll figure that out, like David and I will work to see what makes sense. Okay.
One thing that came up during the meeting today, the context of the ATP, I think, how do we kind of as a commission, as a city, drive the data gathering? I still feel like we've been talking this for 6 years when we started in the commission first time. Then 6 years later, we're still kind of in this position where we don't really have usage data. And I'm just wondering if we should have an agenda item here that is focused on what can we do as a city to get better at the data gathering. it just allows us to make better decisions. I think we're still very much in a guesswork situation today. Technology is ready today. It's no longer the old batch. I think there must be other.
Should that be called as like discuss or data gathering, right? How do we,
Infrastructure usage, data gathering, or something along those lines.
Take out how, take out how.
I don't know if it needs funding or what the issue is.
You said exactly what you'd
Exactly
like us
what
to
you
say.
Discuss how the city is can gather, use data for major infrastructure projects.
Use data for
For,
Major,
for,
for infrastructure projects.
a forward slash between gather and use. Mhm.
well, use data is separate one, right? Oh, that's actually infrastructure use data.
Oh, and, okay.
Yeah, it actually, that's right. So the slash should go away.
Okay. Space.
Yep.
So I don't know if David wants to mention something, but every time there is a major infrastructure project, there's a data collection mechanism that always happens. So I remember we looked at Rodriguez Avenue, there was a data collection period that happened to measure like how many people cross the street, how many, I'm not exactly sure what the request is, because if we're doing that already for major infrastructure projects, it's.
I think the difference is spot measurements when a project is coming around, rather than do systematic monitoring.
So then that's not-
Always have the data.
No,
Because
I understand.
you wanna monitor the effectiveness of your implementation.
I understand that, but
And if you do
can I finish? It's not for major infrastructure projects, that it's probably for general use. This is that's what you mean?
For infrastructure projects, I mean, anything that we implemented over the last, I don't know, 5 years, we should have used it. We should have the ability to monitor.
I'm not disagreeing, I'm just saying, if you say for infrastructure projects, we mean that as for specific projects.
Maybe we can say that can we say that specifically for the recent projects or something like that? That you really wanted to, we spent money and we wanted to see whether data is available to see how they are using.
Right.
So retroactively for the newest projects to see, okay, how much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I would approach it like, you should have data on fingertips all the time. Like, for example, if I ask David, like, hey, David, can you tell me, how many people cross, on a daily basis on an average, at Bob Road, just randomly something? You should be able to go pull up on the data, just how much, there is, right?
Yeah.
Right? So that way, we have data about everything that's going on in the city all the time. And then we do these improvements and we can see, how the usage changes, right? Is it helping positive? Because we don't want to go and collect data when we need it, versus, data should always be available.
I think maybe
They were only that easy.
No, it sounds easy, but I think.
And the thing is, not to get into a discussion about it, we
Yeah.
do have the ability to collect that data at some locations. The problem is, there's not a really. There's no way to verify the accuracy of the data. 'Cause when we've done that and we've gone back later and actually counted from the video, it's like, oh, it counted that as a ped and it was actually and so
But I think.
I don't want to have data that's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I understand.
useless.
We don't want to have
Yeah,
a.
so, but I understand.
95% accurate, right? So
Yeah.
the technology is evolving to a point where it could be 99%
Maybe
accurate.
we're there, yeah.
we have AI technology. I remember like this came up when we got input from the city of San Jose, who came and presented about some of the data collection that they were doing as part of Vision Zero. But anyway, so this is a generic thing. I think we can discuss about it during the meeting to see what can be done and what cannot be done.
Yeah.
And most likely this will need an additional budget, which means that it needs a council recommendation.
Data collection is key for everything, right? Because once you have data, you can make all kind of decisions, like what you do. Right?
Anything else? I don't have anything else. I think there's a good list here.
Yep.
Okay, so if nothing, then we close the future agenda item as well. And Yeah, we have come to the end of the meeting, so this is time is about time is 9:22 and we adjourn the meeting.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.